We have a bunch of players on bye, including the GOAT, Cedric Tillman, so it's going to be an absolute disaster submitting starting lineups this week. I'll try my best to help you out, starting off with Tier 1. You already know to start them: Chase, Jefferson, St. Brown, Neighbors, Tyreek. I know maybe you're going to go to the comment section and go, Mason, Tyreek Hill's been bad. Yeah, I understand he hasn't been typical Tyreek Hill, but you still start him regardless. Starting off Tier 2, the guys that you would typically put in Tier 1, but we just don't know if they're going to be healthy, it will be Nico Collins and A.J. Brown. Now, as it stands right this second, it sounds like Nico's probably going to be back this week. It's a game against the Detroit Lions where I think it should be one of the more exciting games. And also, we know that against the Lions, it's not easy to run the ball. Typically, that's what we've seen the Texans want to do. That's what we've seen a lot of these games where Joe Mixon just takes over. But no, Lions will be able to score. You're probably going to have to throw it against them. Nico should be in an absolute blow-up spot if he does play. Sadly, I have to go up against them in the Flock League, and I'm really hoping he misses personally. Now, A.J. Brown, also usually a Tier 1 player. Obviously, this past week goes down with a knee injury. You only see 47% of the snaps. If he does play, you're going up against Dallas. Dallas should have Micah Parsons back, but still, nonetheless, you would go ahead and you would just jam him in. Now, our next option will be Garrett Wilson. Garrett Wilson is currently the wide receiver 3 in total fantasy points. Now, obviously, you look at points per game. Maybe it's a little bit different here. But regardless, Wilson has been phenomenal. Even if you look at over the past 3 weeks where you've had Davante Adams in town, still you're seeing Garrett Wilson see 9, 8, and 10 targets. So he's averaging 9 targets a game with Davante Adams. You get the blow up with a career high 30 points this past week with multiple receiving touchdowns, with the 90 receiving yards and the 9 receptions. It's a very strong matchup that you have here going up against the Arizona Cardinals, of course. Our next two guys will be Kupp as well as Puka. Cooper Kupp obviously has been phenomenal over the past 2 weeks. The man's sitting here with 8 and 14 targets. So, I mean, Kupp is averaging about 11 targets a game. Now, of course, we go back 2 weeks ago. You can say, well, Mason, Puka Nacua was limited coming off the knee injury. We can say this week, yes, you had Puka getting tossed early. So the reality is, while Kupp's been the absolute dominant alpha, realistically speaking, going into the future, I think that these guys are incredibly close. I think every single target's going to be funneled through them. We should expect a massive step backwards with Demarcus Robinson, which obviously leads to the targets being heavily concentrated to the top 2 guys. I will say it should be a higher scoring game going up against Miami right now. If you are looking at what sportsbooks are projecting, you have an over-under of about 50.5 points here. Now, Deebo Samuel is sitting here in what projects to be the second highest scoring offense in the NFL this week. The San Francisco 49ers have an implied team total of 28.25 points. The only team that is supposed to be better this week offensively than the Niners are the Baltimore Ravens. And honestly, I owe you a massive apology. Last time we looked at Lamar higher, lower, 1.5 passing touchdowns, I told you to go with the lower, and Lamar had 5 passing touchdowns. So I'm not going to make that mistake for the Thursday night game. We are going to try to improve our record to 1 for 178 with the underdog pick'ems this season. And we are going to be going with Lamar Jackson higher than 1.5 passing touchdowns. Of course, if you wanted to tell us on that, you can find the link to Underdog Fantasy in the description and comment section. Promo code FLOCK is going to get you a 50% deposit bonus up to $1,000. Plus, promo code FLOCK is going to be getting you a free Lamar Jackson pick, more than less than half a total yard for this game. And you'll be getting a free team review in the live stream that we're doing every single night. Now, with Deebo, obviously, we have no Ayuk. While Jennings is going to be somebody that you can look at, and Deebo is still very clearly the number 1 tight end in fantasy. I'm expecting Deebo Samuel to be fully healthy coming out of the bye week. I think it was perfect timing. And this is a Bucs secondary that has allowed a ridiculous amount of passing touchdowns over the past month. Now, Drake London will be our next guy. London currently day-to-day with hip pointer. I have no idea if he is going to play. Now, if he does, you're going up against the New Orleans Saints team that has a lot of moving parts. They trade away Marshawn Lattimore. You have new coaching staff coming in, so we don't really know what to expect here 1-for-1 with the matchup wise for London. I don't know what to expect 1-for-1 with his injury either. So this will be something we have to continue to monitor and update on the site every single day. Davante Adams will be our next option. If you are looking at Adams, you get up to the 11 targets this past week. I mean, if you're looking at the 3 weeks that he's been a Jet, you are sitting with 26 total targets. So you are averaging almost 9 targets a game. Very clearly, Garrett Wilson does look like the wide receiver 1 here, but it is kind of like the poor man's offense compared to the Rams, where everything's going to be concentrated to the guys at the very top. You have Mike Williams getting traded away. You have Allen Lazard on the injured reserve. So really the only target competition that you have here is Malachi Corley. So you can make a strong argument to have both Wilson and Adams as wide receiver 1s, especially in a good matchup. Now going over to 14, I have no idea how to rank CeeDee Lamb right now because we know for sure Dak Prescott's not playing this week. But with CeeDee Lamb, we are uncertain about him. He has a shot to play against Philly. Even if he does, he can't be a tier 1 player anymore, at least not with Dak Prescott. Because typically what you're used to seeing here with this Cowboys offense is for them to sit with a projected implied team total of around 24, 25 total points, where the loss of Dak is actually driving this down considerably, where you actually have the Dallas Cowboys only projected out to score about 17 points this week. There's a massive spread on this game. The spread on this game is about 8 points currently, which obviously is massive if you're considering a division rival. Now, Devonta Smith in this game as well will be here with a little bit of an asterisk. We may have to update Devonta Smith's ranking, of course, if you have no A.J. Brown. If A.J. Brown misses, Smith definitely goes to the tier above this. But regardless of if A.J. Brown plays, A.J. Brown misses, Smith will be somebody that you have to start every single week. The only hesitation that you could possibly have is, since he came back from the concussion, the volume has gone down just a bit, where you are looking at a player that's only had 19 targets over the past 4 weeks. Now, of course, with those 19 targets, you've had the 3 receiving touchdowns. But if we don't see the volume tick up and instead we have the efficiency go down, could be a little bit worrisome. Terry McLaurin will be our next name. Obviously, McLaurin has been so damn consistent. He's a must-start wide receiver every single week. Currently, the wide receiver 7 in total fantasy points. Now, of course, this past week, you don't really have the volume. You only have 3 targets, but it doesn't matter. You scored 2 touchdowns. The one thing that you could have against Terry at the moment is it is a tougher matchup that you have going up against the Steelers. Brian Thomas will be your next option. With Thomas, obviously when we see him at 100% health, I do expect that he is going to be much higher than this in these rankings. Going up against the Vikings have a great defense, but they've actually allowed a ton of points to opposing wide receivers so far this season. Now, obviously, back-to-back games with only 4 targets for Brian Thomas Jr., but you go back to the game against Green Bay, you only played 51% of the snaps because he left due to that chest injury. This past week with no Christian Kirk, you actually saw Brian Thomas Jr. go up to 91% of the snaps here in Jacksonville. So now he is an every down player running a route on every single Trevor Lawrence drop back. Obviously, we have to put a little bit of a knock on him just because you are in a spot where we don't know if he's 100%. But still, should be a must-start play every week regardless. And DeAndre Hopkins is probably the last wide receiver in these rankings that I would be comfortable calling a must-start option. Now, with Hopkins, he does work himself up to 60% of the snaps this past week in Kansas City. Now, one thing that we have to monitor is obviously Hopkins had the knee injury coming into the season, and what I read was that this is going to linger all year. This isn't something that's just going to 100% go away. But even if that limits him to maybe only 75% of the snaps in Kansas City at the very most, still, this is great quarterback play. I know for whatever reason, people like hating on Mahomes, but Mahomes is arguably the best quarterback in the league. This is an offense that typically is at the very top of the NFL in their projection. Now, this week, going up against Denver, a little bit worse. You have an implied team total of only about 24.5 points. Obviously, it's a very tough matchup for DeAndre Hopkins, which is why we're going to have him as the last must-start wide receiver. But seeing the 9 targets, seeing the 28 fantasy points, with him finally getting 60% of the snaps here in KC, makes it where I think even though it's a tough matchup, it would be hard to bench him. Now, our next player, we are going to be throwing Darnell Mooney in. With Mooney, obviously, you're looking at a wide receiver that has been very up and down so far this season. You have 4 games with less than 10 fantasy points, but at the same time, you're sitting with 4 games with 15 or more. So you have some natural volatility, but this Falcons offense has been so much better. You have an implied team total here of 25 points with Atlanta, and this is a consistent thing now. We are consistently seeing sportsbooks put the Atlanta Falcons as one of the best offenses in the NFL every single week. And also, it's a spot where Drake London may not be 100%. Now, if London does miss, Darnell Mooney will move even higher. Mooney will move to the tier above as a true must-start option. Whereas instead, I would say this is about the tier that these aren't must-start players. These are definitely players that I would like to start. But if you're like in a 10-team league where you only start 2 wide receivers and 1 flex, I could see you benching one of them. George Pickens will be our next name. You have Mike Williams coming over, but the reality is I'm not expecting Mike Williams to have really any impact whatsoever this week. You're going up against Washington. It's a fine matchup. Obviously, Pickens has been a better option with Russ under center than what he was with Fields. There's more passing volume to go around in this offense. Over the past 2 weeks, you're looking at about 180, 190 total receiving yards. But yeah, I mean, I think, I don't know what else there is to say about Pickens. If you want to rank him as a must-start guy, go for it. Marvin Harrison Jr. has been very much up and down all season. Harrison is probably higher than this in my rest of season rankings. The one drawback that I have is you're going up against the Jets, so this is going to be a very tough matchup here. Zay Flowers going up against Cincy is a wide receiver that I don't mind you at all moving him higher in these rankings. If you think Flowers is going to absolutely crush, if you think Deontay's not going to have a role, you can move Flowers to the tier above. And honestly, as we look at the underdog projections here, you actually have Flowers higher, lower 60.5 receiving yards, whereas you have Deontay Johnson higher, lower 20.5. And now that you think about this, or at least now that you think about the timeline of the Deontay Johnson trade, typically what we'd expect, right, is like the DeAndre Hopkins, where you play maybe 20 to 30% of the snaps your first week in, and then the second week you double that, you're getting to 60, you're getting to 70% of the snaps. Since this is the Thursday night game here for the Ravens, maybe it's tougher to assume that Deontay Johnson's going to get to that kind of playing time. So I think we are too low on Flowers. I will be moving Flowers probably up to about wide receiver 18 in the rankings this week over on flockfantasy.com. But yeah, this should be a very good offense. Sportsbooks are currently saying it's going to be the best offense in the league. You have an implied team total of 29.5 points. It's a game against Cincinnati where more likely than not, you are going to be forced to throw the ball a bit more than you'd want to if you're Baltimore. And the Ravens look like they're the best offense in the NFL right now alongside the Detroit Lions. Josh Downs will be our next name. If we are looking at Downs, this is a wide receiver that's in the games where you've had Joe Flacco, you've had 9, 12, 9, and 9 targets. A little bit disappointing this past week against Minnesota. But still going into the future, I think Downs is super exciting. The only thing I would have this week is it's a little bit of a tougher matchup going up against Buffalo. Our next guy, obviously in the same game with Amari Cooper, will be very difficult to rank right now. The main thing to monitor with Amari is not only his own practice reports, but we're also going to have to be checking in on what you're going to get with Keon Coleman as well. Because if you have Amari playing this week and you have no Keon at the same time, I think Amari could actually move up higher in these ranks. And then DJ Moore going up against the New England Patriots. He plays 99% of the snaps. I don't know if y'all saw this. I saw a bunch of clips on Twitter, people making it seem like DJ Moore is super frustrated with Caleb Williams, blah, blah, blah. I mean, he does see 9 targets, but this is now 3 games straight with fewer than 10 fantasy points. Feel really good to have him as that sell-high candidate when the man was only dropping double-digit performances. But the reality is, I think Caleb's probably a little bit better in the future, and you are seeing this as an offense with an implied team total of almost 23 points. Now, going over to our next option with Tank Dell, looking at Dell here, you had the 9-target game, the 126 receiving yards this past week. You're going up against Detroit, so Houston probably is going to be forced to throw the ball. But for my personal expectations, I think if Nico Collins plays, he's just the alpha and he dominates targets. So if that does happen, I think you could see Dell getting closer to like 4 targets. I mean, because we've actually seen Dell with not necessarily no Diggs, but Nico Collins playing. But we've seen it flipped. We've seen Diggs play and no Nico. And in those games, Dell had 4 and 4 targets and 9 targets and 4 targets. So it's not like Dell is just an absolute must-start player in my mind. Ladd McConkey, yes, he has a little bit of a dip this past week against Cleveland after the absolute blow-up spot against New Orleans with the 29 points. The reality is Ladd McConkey has been extremely consistent so far this season. You are looking at every single one of his games -1, anywhere from 6 to 8 targets. And honestly, you're looking at every single game he's played this season -2 with 6 or 7 targets. I've never seen this type of consistency from a target share perspective. Quentin Johnson coming in obviously had the big play, but Ladd's still for sure the wide receiver 1 here. I'm going up against Tennessee. They're just going to be able to run the ball, though. I'm going over to Jalen Waddle. Dear God. I know like the lateral at the end of the game, it freaking skewed the statistics, but still. I started Waddle this week like a freaking fool. I was excited about it. Like I traded Sal, Ladd McConkey. I was even considering freaking playing Waddle ahead of Ladd last week anyway, so wouldn't really save me regardless. But Waddle gets a good matchup against the Rams this week. It was a very tough matchup against the Bills last week where sportsbooks were very low on the Dolphins offense. The Rams, it's a much better spot. But realistically speaking, I just don't see how you could trust Waddle. I may end up having to start the dude because I have Metcalf on bye and it's a 12-team, 2 wide receiver, 2 flex league. Khalil Shakir will be our next name. With Shakir, you can move him higher if you were to have no Keon or no Amari. It's just very difficult to rank the Bills wide receivers right now, and we simply don't know. I'm going over to what we have with our next names. We're going to be looking at Juwan Jennings at 30. Jennings is my bet here in San Fran. I really hope I'm wrong. I have a ridiculous amount of Ricky Pearsall in underdog drafts. I have Ricky Pearsall in the Flock League. Please come through, Sticky Ricky. But my expectations are Jennings kind of slides into the IE role. And again, this is a phenomenal matchup going up against Tampa. And at the same time, this is currently projected out to be the second highest scoring offense this week, only behind the Baltimore Ravens. We have Calvin Ridley, Courtland Sutton as our next 2 names as wide receivers that are going to see a ton of target volume in garbage offenses. You actually have both players in bad matchups as well going up against the Chargers and Chiefs. Right now, sportsbooks are actually putting the Tennessee Titans as the worst offense in the NFL this week. Afterwards, we have these like shaky wide receiver 2s in their offenses that don't see a ton of volume. We have Pittman and Jordan Addison. Again, obviously Pittman very disappointing this past week. Honestly, F it, man. We need to move Pittman lower than this. Pittman needs to be behind Addison. Pittman, you're looking over the past 2 weeks. The man's had 2 receptions for 30 receiving yards. Over the past 2 weeks, the man's had 6 total fantasy points. 5 total fantasy points. I apologize. Now, obviously, with Flacco coming in, it's definitely a better Colts passing offense. But it's a tough matchup as well going up against Buffalo. I have no idea why the hell I think I can rank Pittman this high. Our last tier, these are the guys that I know y'all are probably going to ask about, but I don't want to start. Xavier Worthy, I just simply don't see how we get started at this point. Of course, Hogan Morans en route for our guy, but still. Deontay Johnson, to be honest with you, this is too high of a ranking on Deontay. Deontay is going to fall in the rankings over there on flockfantasy.com. Do not start Deontay Johnson this week. If you're excited about Deontay Johnson, go over to Underdog Fantasy and take the higher than 20.5 receiving yards. I'm not doing that. I just want to be on record. I'm not doing it. If you're excited about Deontay, you can. Jamison Williams, a boom bust wide receiver coming off the PED suspension. I mean, even before that, Jamison was sitting here averaging 2.5 targets a game. So I don't know really how much it actually matters. Keenan Allen will be our next play. Garbage offense. I know he had 10 targets last week. I still think DJ Moore is the wide receiver 1. So this copy and paste, same thing about Rome. And Ricky Pearsall is the guy I'm sending up a prayer, does something. But in reality, I probably think it's Jennings. I'm hoping I'm wrong, though. I'm hoping Sticky Ricky comes out and outproduces Jennings. And next week in the rankings, we can move him above. But I do want to reiterate, obviously, we are going to be updating the rankings over on flockfantasy.com constantly until kickoff. The updates I'm probably going to make right after this video is we're going to move Flowers up a bit. We're going to move Deontay down. And of course, if you wanted to tail us on that underdog pick, we are going to be going with higher than 1.5 passing touchdowns for Lamar Jackson this Thursday night. You can find that link to Underdog Fantasy in the description, comment section. Code FLOCK is going to give you a 50% deposit bonus up to $1,000. Plus, you're going to be getting a free Lamar Jackson pick, more than less than half a total yard, a free team review in the live stream that we're doing every single night. And we're on a little bit of a heater. We are 1 for about 182 on our underdog picks this season. So we're due. But thank you again. Appreciate you. And hope we get to see you out in live stream tonight.